So this lesson is part of the A-level AQA biology syllabus, and it's on the circulatory system of a mammal. So we'll look at how do large organisms move oxygen around, what are the features of their transport systems, and how is blood circulated in mammals. So diffusion is okay for transport over short distances, but to efficiently supply materials over a large distance, you're going to require a mass transport system. So we need to exchange materials between the environment and ourselves. So things like oxygen, nutrients, carbon dioxide, we need to exchange all those things. So small organisms like the amoeba can exchange that over their body surface. But then as you increase the size of the organism, the surface area to volume ratio gets smaller. So that's when you become more of a need for a mass transport system. So mass transport systems will include a specialist exchange surface inside the organism because that protects it from damage. So our specialist exchange surface is the alveoli epithelium. It needs to absorb the nutrients and the respiratory gases. So the nutrients, that would be the villi that does that in our body. And then the alveoli, the respiratory gases, and also removes the carbon dioxide. A mass transport system will also take materials from cells to the exchange surfaces and back again. So as an organism has evolved, larger structures, tissues and organs have become more specialised and dependent on each other. There is then more of a need for a transport system. So whether or not a specialised transport medium or circulatory pump is needed depends on two factors. So the surface area to volume ratio of the organism and also how active the organism is. So in general, the smaller the surface area to volume ratio and the more active an organism, the greater the need for a specialised transport system and the pump. So features of transport systems, many organisms have these common features. So there are 6 of them. So the first one is it needs a suitable medium. So in our case, it's blood, but you need a suitable medium to carry the material. So it's normally a liquid substance because water readily dissolves substances more easily. So our suitable medium is blood. The mass transport medium needs to be moved in bulk over a large distance. So that's where you get the mass transport from, because it's done in bulk over large distances. They probably have a closed system of vessels that transport the medium and forms a network to distribute it everywhere. So we have our arteries, which will then divide into capillaries to penetrate through the tissues, and then they will reform veins at the other side. So it allows more targeted the nutrients to go to a more targeted place, or the oxygen to go to a more targeted place. Number 4, you need a mechanism for moving the transport medium within the vessels. So you need a mechanism to make the blood move through the vessels, which requires a pressure difference. So it goes from high pressure in the left ventricle, and then when it returns through the vena cava, that will have low pressure there. So you start off with high pressure going out of the aorta, and then low pressure as it returns to the vena cava. So the way in which we move the blood around the vessels is by contraction of body muscles or a pumping organ. So we have the heart that pumps that blood around the body. Just a side note, I know plants aren't mammals, but just a side note just to point out that plants don't have muscles, so they rely on passive processes, e.g. evaporation, to move their transport. It's their medium around. So the transpiration stream is how the water will move through the plant. So it relies on passive processes such as evaporation. Number 5, they will need a mechanism to maintain that mass flow in one direction. So to make sure there is no backflow of blood, we have valves. Number 6, you need a means of controlling the flow of the transport medium to suit the changing needs of different parts of the organism. So we have arterioles, which are between the arteries and the capillaries, and the job of the arterioles is to slow the blood down before it goes into the capillaries, because if it still went at the speed and the pressure that it did from the aorta, it would just burst the capillaries walls because the capillaries are so thin. So the arterioles do slow that down so that the blood goes slower through the capillaries, so it doesn't damage the capillaries. So the transport system in mammals is a closed blood system, i.e. they're all kept in vessels. It doesn't just go anywhere. It has a heart, which is the muscular pump which circulates the blood around the body. It is a double circulatory system because blood passes twice through the heart for each circuit. So it goes up to the lungs to pick up oxygen, and then it gets repumped and goes to the rest of the body. So it's pumped to the lungs, goes back to the heart to be repumped, to be pumped around the body. And the reason for this is because when the blood passes through the lungs, the pressure is reduced because obviously it's slowed down to get through those capillaries. So if it then went immediately to the rest of the body, the pressure would be so low that the circulation would be too slow, and it probably wouldn't be enough to get back up our legs against gravity. So it really needs to be repumped so that the oxygen can be delivered efficiently and fast to the capillaries. So therefore the blood, after it's gone to the lungs, it returns to the heart to boost the pressure before it's then circulated to the body tissues. And this means that substances are delivered to the body quickly, which is very important for mammals because we have a high body temperature. We have to maintain our body temperature because we're warm-blooded, and we also have a high metabolism. So in mammals, they also have vessels, which are arteries, veins, and capillaries. We also have arterioles, which are between the arteries and the capillaries, but the main ones are arteries, veins, and capillaries. The transport system moves substances long distances, but the final part of exchange with the cells is by diffusion. So the final part of the oxygen getting to the cells or the carbon dioxide going from the cells to the blood is still by diffusion. And therefore, it takes place over a large surface area, which is why the capillaries branch out, penetrate the tissues. They're very thin, but there's so many of them, they're so numerous that they have a large surface area. And the walls are very thin, which means there's a short diffusion pathway. And because the blood is continuously circulating, it means there's a steep diffusion gradient. So all things that you need for an efficient exchange surface. So just a little look at different types of vessels. So you've got your pulmonary artery, which takes deoxygenated blood to the lungs. And then you've got the pulmonary vein, which takes oxygenated blood back to the left side of the heart. Just to note that the pulmonary artery is the only artery that takes deoxygenated blood, and the pulmonary vein is the only vein that takes oxygenated blood, so it's the opposite way around to what you usually think. Got the aorta, which is takes oxygenated blood at high pressure to the rest of the body. So that's the capillaries of the upper body. This here is the hepatic artery, so that's taking oxygenated blood to the liver. So anything to do with hepatic is to do with the liver. Once it passes through the liver, it goes into the hepatic vein. You've then got the stomach or the intestines, and the intestines here. And between the intestines and the liver, there is a vessel called the hepatic portal vein. Then you've got the renal arteries, which anything to do with renal, like if you've heard of renal failure, that's the kidneys. So renal artery takes oxygenated blood to the kidneys. Renal vein takes deoxygenated blood from the kidneys. And then you've got your lower body here. So then these will all join together to form, eventually at the top, the vena cava, which is deoxygenated blood at low pressure, which returns back to the right part of the heart. So this is your right atrium, right ventricle, left atrium, left ventricle, the bottom ones are the ventricles, and left atrium. So right atrium, right ventricle, left atrium, left ventricle. And then finally, just a note to say that the coronary arteries are the ones that supply the heart muscle with oxygen or with blood itself, and they branch off from the aorta. So these are very important to get the oxygen to the muscles of the heart, because without oxygen and blood to the heart can't pump anymore because it won't be able to respire. So in terms of a heart attack, if there was a blockage here, right at the top, that would be really quite dangerous because it would mean that blood couldn't get to all of these branches. However, if it was like a blockage here, it would actually only, stop this part of the heart getting oxygen, so it would be more of a minor heart attack. So the coronary artery is very important to supply the blood with oxygen. That's the heart with oxygen. Okay, and that is the end of circulatory system in mammals.